Christmas morning at the Miller family home always felt like a performance. The perfectly decorated tree, the expensive wrapping paper, the careful orchestration of the gift giving, all designed to showcase how successful my parents had become. This year, however, the performance was about to take an unexpected turn. I arrived at 9 a.m. sharp, as tradition demanded, carrying a small bag with gifts for everyone. The house smelled of cinnamon and pine, and classical music played softly in the background. My mother, Rose, was already in full hostess mode, ensuring everyone had coffee and that the photographer she'd hired could capture every perfect moment. "May, you're here," she said, barely looking up from the dining room table where she was arranging pastries. "Everyone's in the living room. We're just waiting for your Uncle Ralph to arrive. Then we'll start opening gifts." I made my way to the living room where my father, Howard, was holding court near the fireplace. My brother, Russell, and his wife, Stella, were seated on the sofa with their two young children, while my sister, Pearl, was elegantly perched in her usual spot by the window. They were all dressed in their Christmas best: designer sweaters, expensive jewelry, the kind of quiet luxury that betrayed an old money family. I had chosen my outfit carefully too, though for different reasons. Simple black jeans, a soft cashmere sweater, and minimalist jewelry. To my family, I looked like someone doing the best they could on limited resources. In reality, every piece I wore cost more than most people's monthly rent, but they were brands they wouldn't recognize. "May, come sit with us," Pearl called, waving me over. "Dad's been telling everyone about the new yacht club membership." I settled into an empty chair and listened as my father described his latest status acquisition. The conversation flowed around me: stock portfolios, vacation homes, private school tuition for the grandchildren, the usual topics that reinforce the family hierarchy, with my parents at the top and me, the struggling artist, at the bottom. Uncle Ralph arrived promptly at 9:30, completing our family gathering. He greeted everyone warmly, making his usual jokes about the traffic and the weather before settling into his favorite armchair. "Now that we're all here," my father announced, "let's begin our Christmas tradition." The gift exchange in the Miller family followed a strict protocol. Dad would call each person up to receive their gifts while the photographer captured the moment. It was part family bonding, part social media content creation. "Russell, come on up!" Dad boomed, his voice full of paternal pride. My brother stood and approached the tree, where a large pile of beautifully wrapped boxes waited. Dad handed him the first package with great ceremony. "For our successful son and his beautiful family. Something small to help with that new house in Greenwich." Russell unwrapped a set of keys tied with a silver ribbon. "Dad, you shouldn't have. The down payment for the house you've been looking at, $200,000. Consider it an early inheritance." The room erupted in congratulations. Stella started to cry. The children clapped, and the photographer captured every emotional moment. I smiled and applauded along with the others, genuinely happy for Russell, despite everything. "Pearl, your turn," Dad continued. My sister glided forward, her designer dress perfectly coordinated with the Christmas color palette. Dad handed her a small Tiffany box. "For our brilliant daughter, who just made partner at the law firm." Pearl opened the box to reveal a stunning diamond necklace. "Dad, it's beautiful." $50,000, he announced proudly. "Only the best for our little legal eagle." More applause, more photos, more celebration. Uncle Ralph received a vintage wine collection valued at $5,000. Even the grandchildren received lavish gifts: top-of-the-line electronics, designer clothes, and enrollment in expensive summer camps. I remained in my chair, watching the performance unfold, waiting for a turn I knew would never come. Finally, Dad looked around the room with an exaggerated expression of completion. "Well, I think that's everyone." The silence that followed was deafening. Every eye in the room flickered to me, then back to Dad, then to me again. The photographer lowered her camera, sensing the shift in energy. "Dad," Pearl said quietly, "what about May?" My father's expression hardened. He looked directly at me, his voice ringing through the room with deliberate clarity. "Some people don't deserve gifts." The words hung in the air like a physical blow. I felt the familiar sting of public humiliation, the same feeling I had experienced countless times growing up when my achievements were dismissed and my choices criticized. Russell shifted uncomfortably. "Dad, that's—" "No, Russell," Dad interrupted. "May made her choices. She dropped out of a perfectly good business program to pursue art. She turned down a job at my company to paint pictures. She's 32 years old and still hasn't figured out how to be a responsible adult. Why should we reward failure?" My mother nodded in agreement. "We've supported her for long enough. Perhaps it's time for a little tough love." The room was completely silent except for the soft, classical music still playing in the background. I could see the discomfort on everyone's faces, the awkwardness of witnessing family cruelty disguised as life lessons. I smiled calmly and pulled out my phone. "That's okay, Dad," I said, my voice steady and pleasant. "I understand your position." I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I needed and hit dial. The phone rang twice before someone answered. "Mr. Patterson, it's May Miller. I hope you're enjoying Christmas morning with your family. Yes, I'm calling about the Miller mortgage account. Actually, I need to discuss some changes to the payment structure." My father's face went white. "May, what are you doing?" I held up a finger, continuing my conversation. "Yes, that's correct. I've been covering the monthly payments for the last 18 months through Pinnock Holdings. No, I'd like to cancel that arrangement, effective immediately. Yes, I understand they'll receive notification of the change within 24 hours. I ended the call and looked up at the shocked faces of my family. "What was that about?" my mother demanded. Before I could answer, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and smiled. "It's your mortgage company," I said sweetly. "They probably want to discuss the status of your account." Dad fumbled for his own phone, his hands trembling slightly as he answered. "Hello, this is Howard Miller." "What do you mean, changes to our account?" I watched as the color drained from his face while he listened to the voice on the other end. "But that's impossible," he sputtered. "We've never missed a payment. What do you mean someone else has been paying?" I stood and walked to the center of the room where all the discarded wrapping paper lay strewn around the Christmas tree. "Dad, while you were explaining to everyone why I don't deserve gifts, I thought this might be a good time to clear up a few misunderstandings about my financial situation." "May, what have you done?" Pearl whispered. "Nothing dramatic," I replied. "I just stopped paying your mortgage and your car payments and your monthly yacht club membership dues and the insurance premiums on this house." The room was completely silent except for Dad's ongoing conversation with the mortgage company, his voice growing more panicked with each exchange. "You see," I continued, "while you've all been assuming I'm struggling to make ends meet as an artist, I've actually been running a rather successful business. Pinnock Holdings? Perhaps you've heard of it." Uncle Ralph's eyes widened. "Pinnock Holdings? The investment firm?" "The very same. We manage about $4 billion in assets across various sectors: real estate, tech, energy, pharmaceuticals. I started it 8 years ago with the money I made from selling my first painting." My mother stared at me as if I'd grown a second head. "That's impossible. You live in that tiny apartment." "I live in that tiny apartment because I like it. It's quiet, it's private, and it's paid for, just like this house was, until about 5 minutes ago." Dad finally ended his call, his face ashen. They say you've been paying our mortgage for 18 months, that without your payments, we're 3 months behind and facing foreclosure." "That's right," I confirmed. "You defaulted on your mortgage 2 years ago when Dad's investment firm lost that big client. Instead of letting you lose the house, I had Pinnock Holdings take over the payments. Anonymously, of course." "But why?" Russell asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Because despite everything, you're my family. Even when you treat me like a disappointment, even when you publicly humiliate me on Christmas, even when you decide I don't deserve gifts, you're still my family." I pulled a folder of documents from my bag, but I'm tired of being treated like a charity case by people who are actually living on my charity. I opened the folder and began to read. Howard Miller, Mortgage payments covered by Pinnock Holdings, $347,000. Rose Miller, car lease payments, $23,000. Russell Miller, private school tuition for both children, $92,000. Pearl Miller, law school loan payments, $150,000. Each name, each amount, each revelation hit the room like a physical blow. In total, over the last 18 months, I have quietly covered $612,000 in family expenses because I believed in taking care of the people I love. Dad sagged into his chair, the weight of his words and actions finally sinking in. May, we had no idea. Of course you didn't, because none of you ever asked about my life. You made assumptions based on my clothes, my apartment, my career choices. You decided I was failing and never bothered to look any deeper. I walked over to the Christmas tree and picked up one of the discarded gift boxes, turning it over in my hands. You want to know about gifts, Dad? Last month, I donated $2 million to the downtown children's hospital. They're naming the new art therapy wing after our family, the Miller Wing. I thought you'd be proud to have our name associated with helping sick children express themselves through creativity. Tears were now streaming down my mother's face. Oh, May. But here's the thing about gifts, I continued. The best ones aren't about showing off wealth or status. They're about understanding what someone truly needs and providing it, out of love. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small, wrapped package. So I do have a gift for you, Dad. For all of you, actually. I handed him the package, which he opened with trembling hands. Inside was a single sheet of paper. What is this? He asked. It's the deed to this house. As of yesterday, Pinnock Holdings is the sole owner. Consider the mortgage officially paid off. The silence was deafening. But there's more, I said, pulling out additional documents. Russell, here's the deed to that Greenwich house you wanted. It's yours, free and clear. Pearl, here's a trust fund that will cover your kids' education through graduate school. Mom, here's the title to that car you've been leasing. I distributed the papers around the room, watching as each family member realized the magnitude of what I had done. And Uncle Ralph, I said, turning to my father's brother, here's something special for you. Remember that little accounting firm you've been trying to buy for the last 5 years? Consider it an early retirement present. Uncle Ralph stared at the documents in his hands, his mouth opening and closing without a sound. May, my father finally managed, this is millions of dollars. $7.3 million to be exact, I confirmed. Consider it my Christmas gift to the family. But why? Pearl asked through her tears. After everything we said, everything we did. I smiled and leaned back in my chair. Because that's what family does. We take care of each other, even when we don't deserve it, even when we're cruel and judgmental and wrong about each other. The photographer, who had remained frozen in a corner, began to quietly pack her equipment, recognizing that this was no longer the kind of Christmas morning that would be featured in the family newsletter. There is one condition, I added, causing everyone to look up sharply. What kind of condition? Dad asked nervously. Sunday dinners. Once a month, at my apartment. No photographers, no performance, no discussions about money or status. Just family, talking about things that actually matter. Of course, Russell said immediately. Anything you want. And Dad, I continued, looking straight at my father, I'd like you to visit the art therapy wing at the children's hospital, spend some time with the kids, see what they're creating. Maybe you'll understand why I chose art over business. My father nodded, tears finally welling in his eyes. May, I am so sorry. The things I said, the way we've treated you, you're forgiven, I said simply. But this ends now. No more assumptions, no more public humiliations, no more deciding who is worthy based on your narrow definition of success. My mother got up and came over to me, her designer dress wrinkled from where she'd been sitting. Can you ever forgive us? We've been such fools. I stood and hugged her, feeling the tension of years of disappointment and judgment finally begin to dissolve. We're family, Mom. We'll figure it out. The rest of Christmas morning passed in a haze of tears, apologies, and tentative conversations about starting over. The expensive gifts that had seemed so important an hour before were forgotten in favor of something far more valuable: the possibility of genuine understanding and respect. As I was preparing to leave that afternoon, Dad met me near the front door. "May, I need you to know how proud I am of what you've accomplished. Not just the money, but the way you handled this entire situation. You could have destroyed us. Instead, you saved us." "I never wanted to destroy you, Dad. I just wanted you to see me." "I see you now," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "and I'm ashamed it took me so long." I hugged him goodbye, feeling as if I were hugging my father for the first time in years. As I drove back to my tiny apartment, I reflected on the morning's events. The money I'd spent was significant, but it wasn't devastating to my business. More importantly, I had finally spoken my truth to the people who mattered most. My phone vibrated with a text from Pearl. "Thank you for the most valuable Christmas gift of all, the chance to know who my sister really is." I smiled and typed back, "See you at Sunday dinner next month." Her reply came immediately. "Wouldn't miss it. And May, I'm bringing homemade cookies, not something from that expensive bakery." For the first time in years, I was actually looking forward to spending time with my family. Sometimes the best gift you can give someone is the chance to be better than they thought they could be. That night, I sat in my small living room with a cup of tea and my sketchbook, thinking about the children I'd met at the hospital's art therapy sessions. Tomorrow, I would call the Wings coordinator and arrange a visit for my family. It was time they understood that success wasn't just about accumulating wealth. It was about using whatever resources you had to make the world a little better. The real gift wasn't the millions of dollars I had given them that morning. It was the chance for all of us to build something new together, something based on love and understanding instead of judgment and assumption. My phone rang, and I saw it was Russell calling. "May, I just wanted to say thank you again for everything today. But I also wanted to ask, would it be okay if I bring the kids over to your place sometime? They've been asking about their Aunt May, who makes beautiful paintings." "I'd love that," I said, my heart warming at the thought of my niece and nephew seeing my studio. "And May, next Christmas, we're doing things differently. No photographer, no performance, just family." "I'd like that very much." As I hung up the phone, I realized that sometimes the most expensive gifts are the ones that cost nothing at all, like forgiveness, understanding, and the chance to start over with the people you love. The business empire I had built was impressive, but the family relationships I was rebuilding were priceless.